Trigger warning. Think for yourself. Question authority. Say what you think. Speak the damn truth. Hello, welcome to Your Two Dads. I'm your co-host, Daryl Platty.
Hi, I'm your co-host, Joe. Daryl, some pretty serious news lately, some pretty horrific things going on with this recent school shooting. You know, everywhere I see online and on the news, they talk about gun control. Tell me, do you support that? Do you think we need to do something?
Gun owner and supporter of the Second Amendment. I understand the arguments and the frustration. I understand when people say thoughts and prayers aren't enough. But unfortunately, it is my opinion that we cannot ever legislate away evildoers from committing horrible things. Now, they have a lot of good points. They have a lot of good points, such as magazine capacity limits. Do we need a 30-round magazine when now some people might be hunters? You know that magazines are already restricted to a 10-round capacity. My issue with that is Charles Whitman, the infamous bell tower sniper who killed countless people. I mean, he had a rifle, a high-powered rifle with a capacity of about 3 rounds. So, magazine capacity, I mean, we can get into that. I understand it, but I don't see the relevance in it. I don't see how that's going to stop or prevent this from happening again. The other issue that I see also that we can touch on is the point of why is a 18-year-old allowed to purchase a rifle, even an AR-15 and AK-47? You know, that's a good question. That is that's an actual good question, because you know you got to be 21 to buy a beer, but you can be 18 and buy a rifle. And I'm now hearing a push to increase the purchasing of cigarettes to 21.
That's interesting. I know things went back and forth on that age, and I know it has to do with the military. And, you know, if you can die for your country, you can do this and this and this. Scientifically, as brain development comes along, you know, they say your prefrontal lobe's not developed until you're about, I think it was at age 23-ish.
24, yeah, that's what
24.
24, yeah.
A good indicator of life, you know, better than even your doctor sometimes, is life insurance. You know, when there's money on the line, and for some reason for males, your rates are really high till about 25 years old, and then for women it's about 23. Perhaps we should take these privileges, you know, these rights. I mean, they are rights, but perhaps they should not apply in an adult way until they hit somewhere between 23 and 25 years old. I got an argument with someone online about, we're youth, we're going to change this, we're going to protest. I don't know what they're protesting, because Donald Trump didn't do any of this. And then, you know, I'm thinking, well, you know, the school shooters, as far as I can recall, these have been all under the age of 25.
Yes.
I mean, as far as I know, the last few ones here have been. That right there in itself would probably take care of the problems there. Another thing, too, is I want to talk about ground security. You know, we're in a world of terrorism. And you're not just talking about one person with mental illness that is a whole thing of the root of what I call the problem there. But, you know, there's also the terrorism thing, which is mental illness, too, of a different sort. And why, you know, as Congress people can sit there and say, we need gun control, we need this, yet can you walk into Congress, you know, with a legally carried gun on your side?
No.
Can you walk through an airport And yeah, I hate to make schools like a prison or an airport, but hey, we spend the money to secure airports, to secure banks, to secure courthouses. Why don't we do a little bit physical perimeter security? I'm not talking about hiring vets. I'm not talking about hiring police, which, I think that should be on the table at least for discussion.
Well, let me.
Arming teachers is, it's a job. It shouldn't be just done volunteer like that. You should be qualified to do these things like any other paid position. So my problem is it's a knee-jerk reaction to take away a constitutional right based off of emotion, based off, if you look at it, if you look at the numbers, honestly, 84 children have died of the flu this season. Where is the mad rush to correct that problem if you want to talk about by the numbers? Let me ask you, do you have any issues with some of the things I'm thinking here?
Oh, I can dive off a springboard into a coin-filled pool of problems like Scrooge McDuck. Let me start with people have issues with having armed guards at schools, but yet I don't see people protesting the fact that school buses don't have safety belts. Now, more kids die per year in school bus accidents because they don't have safety belts than they do in mass shootings.
I will debate that one too, but
what's that?
I was going to talk about the safety belt issue. We'll say that for another show.
Okay. Yeah, because last I'm aware of, if I'm not riding a car or driving a car as an adult, as a passenger without a safety belt, I can get a ticket. So it's kind of interesting that we care so much about our children when it comes to guns, but not when it comes to safety belts. So I sense a bit of hypocrisy there, or maybe a lack of integrity in the argument when you're talking about caring for kids, which that's something that I've complained about for years, ever since I put my 5-year-olds in a school bus, that there's no safety belt. And in Kentucky, we've had several terrible accidents involving school buses with many fatalities and injuries. Now, I'm frustrated that we have to have a conversation like this when it's talking about gun control. And there's a lot of these talking points that are coming up that, to me, it bothers me. Now, okay, let's say 21, and then you can buy a weapon. When it comes to guns and firearms and rifles, handguns, many kids grow up with their father teaching them how to shoot, the gun safety rules, the 5 main rules of gun safety, which I can explain what that is later, but it's neither here nor there. But the point is, by the time a child reaches the age of 18, they've been shooting for almost 10 years.
That's where you have a cultural difference, because a lot of these people up here in the north their experience of guns are what they've seen on TV. It's an evil boogeyman. They've never touched or been around one. And I think you touch on a good point right there, is the disparaging, thoughts of, oh, this is the gun culture, and oh, look, you're part of the gun culture. And it's like, right there you're going to have a disconnect. Exactly what you just talked about there. People just not see that. We've talked about this on our show before, where two sides of an issue don't understand the basic ground rules, the basic core argument based off of that point of view difference.
Yeah, and it's a closed-minded argument. Now, one thing I've noticed on social media and Facebook and whatnot, and friends and family who I could say were left-leaning Hillary supporters, or at the very minimum, I could say that they were anti-Trump and are
Okay.
anti-Trump. I don't recall with all of these terrible, you know, mass shootings, and I use quotations there because, you know, now they're trying to say that we've already had 18 school shootings this year.
Yeah,
Which
and
when
I'll
you look
interject
at
on
it,
that one.
when you
Even
look
your
at
buddy
that,
Bernie
that's
Sanders there.
complete false. It's completely
Yeah.
just out of context. You know, one guy killed himself in a school that was abandoned, and they called that a school shooting.
Yeah.
So
Bernie Sanders had to apologize on his webpage directly
right,
for that.
right. But I don't remember the outrage as far as dealing with friends and family on social media concerning we need to do something now when Obama was president. It seemed like maybe there was some sort of comfort in knowing that there was a Democrat in office that was going to do something about it. I remember all these Democrats during the Sandy Hook massacre that, you know, just sat around on the floor of the Capitol like a bunch of kindergartners during a timeout saying, we're not
I
going to go
forgot about
anywhere.
that. I
Right.
forgot about that.
So I think that just made people feel good to know that Democrats are in power, they're going to do something about it. So we don't really need to raise a big fuss. The major fuss was on MSNBC and CNN, but it really wasn't all over Facebook and social media and conversations and debates with friends and family like it is now because we have a Republican in office. So we really need to do something about it now. And I question that. Now the thing is when you look at what happened here, this was an orphan. His father died when he was very young. And as soon as his father died, I believe he was around 4 or 5, around that age, his mother was reaching out to the neighbor to take him. Like she couldn't handle it. She couldn't handle this child. There was, police were called to their house 30-something times.
Wow.
This kid was shooting raccoons and rats in the yard. He was sicking his dog on the neighbor's pigs. I guess they must live down in a farm or somewhere down here in Florida. But there's a lot of signs that this kid had issues. He was expelled. He brought. He was found to have shell casings in his backpack. Was banned from having a backpack in school, which is pretty weird.
Singled out. Singled out,
He was
right?
finally expelled. But no police records. If anybody would have done their job and said, hey, this kid has done a lot of things. We've been out here 30-something times, and his foster mother, you know, who died a few years ago, and then he's been living with, I guess, friends of the family or a relative. I'm not sure on that. But the thing is he's committed crimes, and it was all swept under the rug. Now, if he would have been convicted of any of these crimes, chances are he would have been on some sort of watch list. You know, when I have a CCW, and even when I go and purchase a new firearm, they still do a background check, even though I'm already subject to a background check, a rolling background check every 30 days. Now, if I commit a crime, then I'm not allowed to buy a gun.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. So we always have, you know, people who fall through the cracks because we're talking about individuals in government who are just human who make mistakes. Now,
or it's not their job. It's not their job to. I'll interject here. As part of the point of this whole show is about being a father and, you know, us being dads.
Exactly.
And obviously, if you want to get to the root, we want to get to the root of this. You know, we'll start off with gun control, but it's not the real issue at hand. The real issue is how do you take care, you know, there's nothing justifying what he did, but you can see everything leading up to it, especially after the fact. And whose job is it to actually do this? Because you can't blame any one individual saying, hey, it was this person's job, it was this person's job, it was this person's job that failed. But accumulative, it's everything that led up to this.
It's the parents' job, the mother and father. Now, this kid was an orphan.
Yeah.
because
I
there
mean,
was obviously some sort of, you know, familial failure between mother and father.
yeah.
And so
And
this
orphans
is this
happen.
is a baby thrown into the system. Now, I guess this is my excuse me, maybe this is when you'll have the far left people saying, well, this is why we need abortion protected, because if maybe his mom never wanted to have him and he would have been aborted and all these lives would have been saved. Now, we'll save that topic for another show, but
It's
the
another
point
topic.
is,
Yep.
when you have a child that doesn't grow up in a home with a father and a mother, you're going to have issues. I mean, it's almost guaranteed. So I'm a strong proponent of therapy. Now, I come from a broken home, but I have a stepfather who stepped in when I was about 2, 3 years old. But even that short period of time, I still benefited from a few years of therapy when I was a teenager.
Yeah. And
So,
there's no. The problem is we look for a system of rules and do this, do this, do this, and having more than one kid, you already learn that doesn't work.
right.
You need a custom solution for every person through the system.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're libertarian, and it's not the government's job to take care of you from cradle to grave. So how do you, in the past we might have used the church, but people don't follow that like they used to. People don't,
Yeah.
you can't just say the church, and there were flaws in that system just as much.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so yeah. How do you, and to sit there and say, let's take away guns from you or me? I could see. I will say we should evaluate the age of access, which is we talked about. Point number two, because of this day and age, you can't throw. I was going to say something about it's a terrorism. There's terrorism, and then there's homegrown people with issues. You can't throw candy at the issue at them and expect it to go away.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to combat it with force, which would be a police officer in the schools. It actually might help with some of that issues with people having trouble with cops. If it's a very
Right.
friendly kid, someone who's really good with kids, cop too, and build that
Mm-hmm.
trusting relationship with police.
Okay.
Keep them on the straight and narrow when they don't have the support at home because mom and dad are getting arrested by cops.
Well, we have the DARE program, last I knew,
Yeah.
where cops come to school and they talk about drug use and the resistance.
How could we do that every day? Presence wise, and
Well,
I'll let you talk.
there's a lot of qualified military men and women that's been through more training than the average bear when it comes to safety and firearm use and whatnot. Now, this sparks debate on, well, most military suffer from PSTD. Well, okay, true. Fair
Well, we're
enough.
failing that too. That's a system of that failure. You can obviously tell the people who had a positive, it probably doesn't take a bit of screening to say this one's going to have issues. He's probably not good working with kids right now because he has his own issues. And that's a whole nother show right there. Let's take care of people who take care of us
Exactly.
in the military.
So anyway, that's one option. That's one option. But the point is also we have security guards that are armed who go through screening and background checks, and they're perfectly fine defending amusement parks and other places of interest because they're under attack. Like, for example, down here in Kentucky, we have Noah's Ark, the Ark Encounter, and we have armed guards down there, and it's totally fine. Why? Well, it's a target. You have a Christian theme park, and it's totally reasonable for them to have armed security. They also have a canine unit. Perfectly reasonable. It's perfectly reasonable for us to protect our children at school. But my issue is do we really care? Let me ask you liberals out there. Do we really care about our kids?
Well, they'll tell you.
Do we really care about humans? Because, again,
wanting to keep your constitutional right makes it sound like you don't care about your kids. I've heard that one a few times.
I don't see people protesting why isn't there safety belt laws in school buses after fatal accidents. I just don't see that. You know, you have in Israel where they've had the same problem with schools being a soft target and children are being slaughtered. And then they start instituting armed guards at schools, and it damn near took care of the problem.
Yeah.
Russia had this terrible terrorist attack back in the early 90s where dozens of children were slaughtered by a terrorist group, and they've done the same thing.
You know, in the short and simple, I think we have it right there is securing it like you would, geez, as much as the Congress building where these politicians work. Securing it
Yeah.
that, you know, that would, no one's going after my guns, no one's going after your guns, nobody's changing constitutional rights, but you are treating it with, you know, I mean, treat it like an airport.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it's inconvenient, and I know part of the problem too was the student polls. You know, they do have some schools have some more security than others, and this is a logistics problem here where they pulled the fire alarm to bypass the whole security system.
Right.
So, you know, just like everything else, we're pretty smart people. We come up with a solution for that too.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps a school zone itself, perhaps the security envelope begins on the school grounds instead of having an open playground. You do a security zone that starts at the front entrance of the property. You know, there's things that can be done that can, you know, reduce things, but that's what you do as an American. You know, people create problems with free speech. You don't ban free speech. You do 1,000 other steps so you don't have to ban free speech. Yet fulfill the problem that you're having.
Well, also as far as police officers, how many times have you seen a cop sitting behind bushes looking for that speeder when they could be patrolling a neighborhood like today's President's Day as we record this? And I've seen police officers looking for speeders on a highway during a slow traffic holiday instead of patrolling neighborhoods and trailer parks where there could be a bunch of juvenile delinquents who are going to vandalize someone's car or beat up that nerd because we're out of school today. Why don't those cops, instead of looking for that $55 to $100 speeding ticket, maybe they should patrol school parking lots a little bit more?
Yeah, or, you know, go out there and start playing basketball or something. It happens. Don't get me wrong, it happens. But well, that's the problem. Is it's funding and money too is a huge deal of what motivates us. It's also the huge deal of why this kind of mental disorder goes on. You know, why you go to prison and 70% of the people in long-term prison are actually mental ill.
Right. Well,
you know,
shame on us for being almost 20 minutes into the show and not mentioning the key point of the people on the left when it comes to gun control, which is we don't have a gun problem. They'll even say we have a mental health problem. To which my rebuttal is, okay, I mentioned Charles Whitman earlier. He killed his mother, killed his father, climbed up on top of a bell tower and killed almost 30 people with a high-power rifle. And then later it was determined that he had a brain tumor that was putting pressure on his amygdala, which causes his temperamental, control to just vanish.
Yeah.
So this is somebody who had a mental health issue from a disease that was not his fault, that was not diagnosed. Now, if you want to talk about a mental health problems, and we have Charles Whitman as an example, shouldn't everybody who's had a concussion, you look at the NFL right now, the CTE problems they have with even the Hall of Fame linebacker Junior Seau, who killed himself, who shot himself in his chest so his brain could be examined because he knew that there was something wrong with his head because of the concussions that he was given. You have Chris Henry, a Bengals wide receiver, who also, this guy was 24 or 25 years old, who jumped on the hood of his fiance's pickup truck in Florida and fell off and was killed. And it was later discovered that he also had CTE. He had a mental health disorder. And he was also a gun owner. So if you want to go after mental health, are you going to put the government in charge of that? Who's going to determine that? What are the parameters and what are the requirements? Did you see a therapist because maybe your marriage is falling apart, so therefore you lose your gun rights?
Well, that's the
Were you
problem is
on
you're
some
talking
sort of
about,
antidepressant because you're changing jobs or was fired and you have a lot of things going on in life? Maybe you have anxiety issues. Maybe you've had some sort of head trauma because you played high school football. So where does it stop? Maybe you have brain cancer.
yeah.
Maybe you have a injury on the job, or you've had your tonsils taken out, or a root canal, or your wisdom teeth taken out, and you're taking Tylenol 3s, and it says in a bottle, do not operate heavy machinery, and you have to miss a day of work because you're not trusted to drive a car, but yet it's okay to own a gun. Now,
Well,
we've already
here,
had over 40.
let me answer what you said a little bit ago
Okay, go
there.
ahead.
Um, and this is one of the debate. You know, Trump gave gun to mental, you know, took away the ban, you know, where you could take away your gun rights to mentally ill people, mentally ill
Mm-hmm.
people. And the problem with that is you are talking about a constitutional right. If someone said,
Right.
you know, if a soldier says, I want a therapy dog, your counselor can turn you in. And this is where this is not so easy. I get what you're saying because all these things lead up to something, and you need a better reporting, a better a red flag system. Let's call it a red flag system.
Mm-hmm.
You need we need to implement a red flag system. But then on the other hand, if I'm going in because I want a therapy dog, or I'm depressed, or I just get a divorce, I don't want police knocking on my door and stealing my guns over it.
Exactly.
So
So,
where do you fix? I mean, I get what you're saying, and I agree with 100%. But there is that freaking hard line of taking, and this is where I agree with Trump. The situation fixed a problem with PSTD and some other
mhm.
things, and I get why they put that in place. But
And this
we're,
is my
but
issue with the left is because they don't have a defined line of mental health is the problem. We need to fix mental health. If you're mentally unstable, if you've been diagnosed as, bipolar or you have some other issues, you're not allowed a gun. Well, you know how hard it is to be diagnosed bipolar? I mean, people can just say they're bipolar because they're happy one minute, then they get a bill in the mail and they're irate the next minute and they say, oh, I'm bipolar. It's very hard to be diagnosed by a psychotherapist. You usually need a second opinion
and
and
it
testing and an
changes.
observation to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Now, I know people who are clinically diagnosed bipolar, and it's not easy. But the thing is there's no fine line on mental disorder, meaning you don't get a gun. I've even heard the left say, well, no fly, no buy. Well, we've had congressmen who have been put on the no fly list by mistake. So you're
Where's
going
the
to
due
take away their
process?
Second
I mean,
Amendment?
I'll word the due process. Where's the official? What's the criteria right here that gets you on the list? What's the appeal process?
Oh, there
You
is
lock
no.
someone up in jail, you better have. We're pretty good at figuring out when you can't lock someone in jail.
Right.
And yes, big mistakes. Some people go spend a lifetime in prison for no good reason.
Mm-hmm.
But then, I'd say that it's a good enough system that we're pretty much all comfortable with it.
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
we definitely have an issue. And what I see it, this isn't even it should not be an issue up to debate. Because the problem could be solved in the rearing and development of the child as they grow up. I mean, you come together as a man and a woman, and you have a child together. I mean, the
yeah.
information's out there. To raise a child from birth to 18 is going to run about $300,000.
Mhm.
So if you don't have your stuff together enough to say, okay, we're going to have a baby, we need to get serious here. The information's out there that to develop a baby, boy or girl, into a fully developed, well-mannered, rounded individual, it takes both parents, mother and father, that contrast of different personality types to handle situations as that baby morphs into an adult. For example, I've always told my children, I'm not raising kids. It drives me nuts when it says, I raise my kids right. You're not raising kids. They are kids now. Your job is to raise future adults who are going to contribute back to society. and make the world a better place, and that is the responsibility I put on my children. And I've told them that since they were little. Now, I have a straight A college student daughter, and I have a straight A high school son. Okay, my daughter wants to be a teacher, and my son wants to be an electrician. Now, completely different things here going on. My daughter, feminine, wants to do something involving people. My son, masculine, wants to do things involving things. Now, that comes from having a strong mother and a strong father. Does that mean they're privileged? No, it just means that my wife and I knew what we were getting into when we got married and decided to have a family, and that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen anymore as much as it used to. And so I've come up with this rational idea that some people call radical. Okay, we have mandatory classes that you have to take in high school to graduate. Now it includes a foreign language class. Why can't we have ROTC, a mandatory class? Since the Second Amendment is the Second Amendment, meaning it's very important. It's right after freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of protest, freedom to assemble. Okay? So why don't we have ROTC as a mandatory program in high school? Why don't we have, if you get an education on the public dime through taxpayers, through the public school system, why isn't it required on you to give something back to the community? Public service, tutoring, mentoring, or you can join the Coast Guard, the National Guard. You can help people out during times of natural disasters, or you can join the military, or you can just clean up parks. You can do something to give back. Now, if the parents aren't there, the ROTC and the 2-year mandatory, 20 hours a week, whatever it is, it's just an idea off the top of my head. Maybe that would help fulfill that gap where the mom and dad aren't doing their job. And I think that's the problem, not a mental illness problem. We have a parenting problem. Hence
well, I was going to say here, I'm going to disagree. We actually do have a part of a mental illness problem, but when I talked about those criterias for when we put someone in jail,
mm-hmm.
It's pretty clear when someone committed a crime or not. It's not clear whatsoever, when someone is mentally ill in most cases here. We don't have the research. We're kind of like in the dark ages when it comes to understanding the mind.
Well, yeah, in the 50s, we used to just throw a net on people on the sidewalk that were acting crazy and lock them up in a loony bin and put them through electroshock therapy.
Yeah. I mean, that we're only a generation away from that.
Exactly.
I'm watching this film. My parents grew up in a world that did lobotomies,
mm-hmm.
transorbital lobotomies,
yep.
sticking a toothpick up your eyelid and destroying your brain.
Yep.
This is what, my parents went through. So we are really we're like bloodletting when it comes to understanding the mind. So
yeah,
I get that point, and I'm going to jump on your ROTC thing too. Real life training does help immensely in the absence of parents. Even with parents as getting out of the house, and I'm 100% behind you of 2 years of, I'm going to say military training, but you can't force girls or people who are pacifists.
Mm-hmm.
Or even, you can't force anyone on the front line.
Well,
so right away, I'm going to debunk. I'm sorry?
That's why I say civil service.
Yeah, be a brown shirt community organizer for 2 years.
Exactly.
I'm just kidding. But no, exactly what I'm saying there, though, is if you want to do guns and military and this and that, that's great. It's not counting frontline service. After your 2 years, if you want to join and enlist, that's where you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally 100% with you, just because it's the way to give dedication to country, dedication to community, and some real life experience before you get out there.
Yeah, and it could be just a simple thing of, providing soup and meals to the homeless at a soup kitchen.
Exactly.
To give back something. And like I said, I mean, this is just an idea off the top of my head. I'm not pushing to legislate this. I'm a small government guy, but my thing is, I'm a classical liberal, where it's, don't just expect something for nothing. if you're going to get a public education, because a couple things, maybe your parents couldn't afford to send you to private school, or maybe one of your parents isn't making enough money to provide the other one to stay at home and homeschool you, so you need to go through the public school system, which is taxpayer based. Why not give a little something back to community? You know,
It's not going to be
what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country? This is the John Kennedy classic liberal ideology, in which I am.
No.
But now all of a sudden, I sound like a alt-right fascist when I say that.
It's not a solution that is. Everyone thinks a one-liner is going to fix it. Let's ban guns. Let's reduce. You don't fix complex problems that have been built up with one-liners.
Right.
And typically, it's not one thing. You want to get rid of teen pregnancy. You want, it's not going to just say, just do this and that. Sometimes this works for some. We're fathers. We know this. It's giving as much information as you can so people can make the right decisions is what the job of the parents is. In lieu of that, you have to give, safer, like you talk about 2 years of ROTC, it's giving people more knowledge to make good decisions. It's also forcing them to be part of a community. Antisocial behavior, that would be a great spot to screen for those antisocial behavior signs.
Yeah, just to clarify, I suggest like a class of ROTC, like you would take a math class, and then 2 years of public service, military service, or civil service, something to where you give back, and it can start from the time you're 16, because technically at 16 you can drop out of high school and your parents aren't penalized. And see, and I've heard the argument like, well, I don't like the idea of forcing our young kids and our young adults into doing something. Well, we already force men to sign up for the draft. We don't force women, so I don't see where the male privilege is there. I see that as unfair. We also force our students to take mandatory classes such as a foreign language class, a computers class, science. You have your STEM classes that are all mandatory. And if your child doesn't go to school, then the parents can actually be, prosecuted for negligence. So there are some sort of issues here as far as forcing our kids to do something. We kind of, in a way, force them to follow the law. Because if you don't follow the law, you break the law, you're going to jail. So we live in a society that's founded on laws and regulations. So I don't see a problem in this, especially when you have liberals jumping off the deep end here, wanting to ban all the quote-unquote assault rifles, which I just find ridiculous. AR stands for Armalite. It doesn't stand for assault rifle. So you have to have the IQ of ranch dressing to think that AR stands for assault rifle.
You don't know. It's a big assumption thing. Laws and regulations. Following societal rules. That's another thing. When there's a great example of a kid that was going up and down from church, would not stop going up and down the stairs. And then finally the pastor said, hey, young man, you're going to have to stay here or go down there. And he turns around and rolls his eyes. And this is like a 4-year-old, rolls his eyes and continues to talk. And then the parent, I could see it was a grandparent. It wasn't the primary parent. But right there, I could see the failure. This kid has never had somebody saying, look, someone's talking to you, pay attention.
Right.
When you talk to I talked to them downstairs, and they said there were 4 or 5 of them gatekeeping, and he says, I don't have to listen to you, and took off. And that's the problem I'm seeing is the kid at 4 years old has no respect for his own parents. What's that kid going to be like at 14?
I went through this thing, and you've heard it, you're a father. The terrible twos. Now, I was a terrible two, for sure. I didn't have a father figure in the home, so I was a terrible two. However, I noticed my kids, they never went through that phase.
Yeah,
they knew they couldn't get nothing past that.
It's interesting because my parents I was going to say, it's like I really didn't have that period. I had the period where...
Interesting, Joe.
I did not have a horrible...
Through development.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So
I've
let's
had
get.
that point where they'll cry, have like a cry fest, and it's usually before they understand like even English good, you know.
Oh, so that means the little cry fest it too, and when there's no father to, you know, show a little bit of tough love. The terrible twos turn into the SJWs that we have today.
Yeah,
I'm going to cry and get my way. So let's bring it back to the gun control issue. I want to talk a little bit about the banning of assault rifles. And I'm tired of doing this. Let's talk about that. Now, it's been my opinion where you have the Orlando nightclub shooting where this person used handguns, didn't use an assault rifle, as far as my understanding. Maybe you can correct me, but I'm pretty sure he used handguns.
no guns allowed. Wait, that couldn't have happened, but
Now,
sorry.
the thing with handguns is I can pack. I did it today. I went to the gun range and I literally had 3 guns on my waistband, on my body, going into the gun range that was concealed, and they were all loaded. I'm talking a 45 that had 10 plus 1. I'm talking a 9mm that had 15 plus 1, and a 40 caliber that had 14 plus 1. Now these are 3 guns on my person with magazines loaded in a bag ready to go. And in my bag I had my 44 Magnum, and in my bag I also had my 380 loaded ready to go. Because why? I'm doing target practice and I don't waste time because I'm paying by the hour at the gun range. So if you want to ban a big rifle, you're just going to make it easier for people to buy a handgun, conceal that into small, tight places, and pack more guns, more ammunition than a big 3-foot long rifle with a 9-inch long magazine that holds 30 rounds. You can get a handgun that holds up to 25 rounds in some cases. So I don't see where banning this terrible black threatening looking beast of a rifle, and we'll call it an assault rifle, is going to ever prevent somebody from using a firearm to kill somebody. When you look at Australia, liberals love to point to Australia when they have their buyback program. Oh, gun crime has come way down. Well, you want to know what's risen and taken its place? Because their murder rate stayed the same.
Yeah.
Baseball bat death, knife death, frying pan death. I mean,
Well,
it's
okay,
ridiculous.
I'm going to interject here. What about Mexico? What about Honduras? What about Brazil? They have very strict gun control,
Yes.
and their murder rate's higher than us. And then you get other places that might have much more liberal gun laws. I think it was Czech Republic, maybe one of them. Switzerland. You hear all these other things. You know, yeah, you have something laying around. It doesn't help when you have a society that has other problems, and that's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to say. These societies have other problems, and the only thing that banning weapons does is take them from legal people, and you know exactly what the ending of that is. North Korea, Soviet Union. People,
Well, what's the
you don't
immigrant
the whole.
situation? What's the immigrant situation like from those countries? Don't they want to come here?
You mean they're not fleeing into the countries? Are
Bring me
people
your
running into
child and
North
huddled
Korea?
masses, because I will protect you, because I don't have gun laws that allow tyrannies to murder you by the millions.
Yes.
That is why people come to America, because they have the First and Second Amendment. No one really cares about the fifth. Only the fifth, I guess, if you're a criminal, you don't want to incriminate yourself. But the First and Second Amendment, my God, this is what America is. That's why people come here, because they want to be able to have the freedom of religion and freedom of
But but
speech.
but but Europe,
Oh,
they're
Europe, yeah,
havens
where you
for, and they
have
have
a.
huge gun control. People forget what was some of the first interview guys we've talked to. What was this World War II vets, the Greatest Generation? Why were they over there? Were they over
Exactly,
there
gun control.
enjoying, enjoying the frickin' croissants and the
Okay,
breads, or
let's just say let's just play this out. So let's just ban guns except for muskets for hunting and black powdered guns where you're looking at maybe 2 rounds per minute if you're 2 rounds per minute if you're really fast. So okay, that's fine. That'll take care of killings. Well, what happened in China, Joe, with the crazy man with a knife on the train? How many people were killed?
29
Mm,
and 120 some injured. I mean, if
wow.
you're determined to do it, how about this sidewalk in Paris with a truck mowing down over 100 people?
Sounds like an assault van. And you have an assault knife.
So yeah, I mean, in certain situations where you don't have this looming dictator coming over you, you could be fine for a generation or two. When did we make the Second Amendment? The founding of this country.
Mm,
Being great for a generation or two with people not being armed can be fine. But what happens 100 years from now when the next
exactly.
dictator comes around?
Exactly. Because it will happen. It
Yeah,
will happen.
well, I
For
got to
me, in
wrap up
my
here. So,
opinion, and this is a good classic bumper sticker slogan since the left are so good at theirs, let me give one back at you. Gun
sounds good.
control is using both hands.
That sounds like a good way to end it there.
I have next to me down here, for some of the viewers, I have an AR and I have an AK. And they haven't hurt anybody during the filming of this show. Stay strong, America.